know, so they just kind of.
Enemy in the container.
Oh well, thank you for pretty much confirming what I just said.
Where I am now, I resided somewhere in Minnesota. It's cold. It's like negative 18 degrees outside right now.
80s pop funk, you know.
My first job was on Madden 20.
Hey everyone, I'm Jewel Ifeguni. What do? I do a lot of things, but I'll say like my core is anything I can do to use media and technology to build an inclusive world, I am there. And so I'm founder and CEO of Youmatter Studios. It's a company I started back in college that is really focused on creating content to inspire the next generation to be inclusive. But also I've been a game producer for some time. So previously, I was a game producer at Minecraft for a couple years, and today I work for Decoy Games, which is a Black-owned game studio, period. And I'm an associate game producer there too. So I'm super excited about that. And outside of that, I'm an award-winning filmmaker. So again, creating content that's empathy, that's forefronting underrepresented voices, and again, really driving that conversation. And outside of that, I'm a vibrant host, vibrant person. Like I just like to make people feel good, catch me on the gram, catch me on YouTube, catch me everywhere. All right, that's like a little snippet of who I am, period.
Cool. So kind of dive in a little bit more into like, I guess your passions, I guess whatever you're kind of working on sort of now as far as like, are you working more on the, the gaming side or more, the video side or the content creation side? Like kind of what's the jam going right now?
That's a good question because I've been kind of going through like a transition, if that makes sense. Like I feel like in terms of like where my life is, I'm always gonna have my feet in both industries. And when I say both, I mean like games and then television, right? So like definitely like my life right now is mostly games. Like I just transitioned actually from Minecraft to Decoy Games. So I'm really focusing on learning the ropes and really understanding our vision of the game, which stay tuned, it's going to be popping and getting to know the team. So that's a lot of like what I do. I mean, that's my day job, but also by night, like I am about to launch my podcast soon. So really trying to create content that is uplifting and really educating folks on how to break into the gaming industry or becoming a film producer as well. So that's my life. It's like creating and also actually it's holistically creating. So I think that's the safest way to say that's where I'm at. I'm creating. I'm just gonna say a little small flex. Any team that has me as producer is lucky because I've worn, but I always say that because I've worn so many hats. So let's take actually my current role as a producer for Decoy Games, right? Like because I've been the founder when it comes to my company, I can empathize with the leaders, but also I've been the creator that's had to be part of a team. I've been the developer in my past life. I know how to code. So like I used to be a software developer at Microsoft a couple of years ago as an intern. Um, so I can relate with the game makers, but also like I understand what it's like to be an artist. So when folks are giving me critiques and understanding the difference between like these critiques aren't personal, these are critiques to make sure the art is well. So I think that's what enables me to be a great producer in terms of making sure things get put together, is because I can empathize mostly with a majority of the people I work around. And that empathy is so important because when you're all collectively trying to work towards a goal and you're the producer that needs to keep things together and ensure we don't just deliver, but deliver at quality, it's key for you to ensure that your team is empowered the whole time along the way. Because I've been in a lot of different environments, whether it's producing a game, whether it's producing a film, whether it's producing a TV show, that team synergy is key and vital to the success of the product. And you can see when the synergy is not there because the product ends up being a little trash. So luckily I've never been part of that, period. But those are the things I bring to the tables because I've worn so many different hats in this industry. It really allows me to ensure that I can help drive a team to success.
Take a step back a little bit, kind of how did you even kind of get interested in like this path, that you're kind of taking as far as games and, TV and stuff like that? Like, was this like a childhood like dream type of thing? Like, did you always want to do this? Like, kind of how did this come about?
See, this is one of my favorite questions because now I get to like go back into my life story. So let's rewind. Growing up, like the dream wasn't to do exactly this. I knew I wanted my name in lights. I knew I wanted to be a singer and like just create music. Like that was like my thing. But I also grew up in a Nigerian home and they have very like exact expectations. Like you're a doctor, a lawyer, an engineer, or a disgrace. So you know, as I'm going through my studies, it was like sometime midway high school where I was like, you know what? You know, I used to be a big gamer growing up. Like, I loved a lot of the games that sound silly now because they were inspired by like SpongeBob or Scooby Doo, but they were intense. Like, I don't know if there's anybody that's like Toontown players, but that was like that was my thing for years. But I'm saying all of this because as it was getting towards the end of high school, it's like, you know what? I had kind of gone away from gaming and I was really into social media. So I was like, okay, what's the tie behind all of this? Okay, computer science. So that's when I really started to kind of get closer into the industry, is when I was like, hey, I'm going to take my first computer science class. So, you know, I grew up in a predominantly white neighborhood and I took my first CS class my senior year of high school. And I was very, very fortunate that my teacher was Black. And so that also was like that early affirmation, like, okay, you know what? Like, I belong in this industry too, which is rare as a Black woman, especially that Black people in general represent around 2% or less in the tech industry. And so after taking that class, I had applied to scholarships to like get into studying computer science at University of Illinois. And I didn't get the scholarships, but because of one scholarship I didn't get, I got into the program associated to it, which was Google's Computer Science Summer Institute. It was really dope, okay, because it was the first time they had their Summer Institute in Chicago. So again, I got to have more of a sense of like what the industry looks like. I got to meet more folks like me that were just interested in getting to tech, but they had a bunch of different backgrounds, like musicians, artists, content creators. So I was like, okay, this is cool. This is cool. And then I think like my breakthrough into actually like getting into gaming was fast forward when I got my first internship. And so unfortunately, you know, Microsoft recruiters came to my school my freshman year. You know, I did my little thing, okay. And I was able to get an internship at Microsoft. And at the end of that internship, there was a hackathon and I worked with friends to build a video game called #Queen. And that's where my little sister was the main character and she was fighting these monsters that were breaking down her confidence. Like, now it's not out now, okay, but you know, you get the gist. Content, especially content that's at the intersection of media and technology, that can really get folks to like build that empathy and really can improve representation. And so I ran with it, and that's what inspired me in my sophomore year to create my own studio called Youmatter Studios. And that's why I named it Youmatter Studios, because of the feeling I want folks to feel whenever they see content coming out of my studio. And so originally, you know, we started as a game studio, and let's just say I learned a lot of lessons. We started with like a group of 20 of us, sophomores, juniors, freshmen from different backgrounds, had a lot of fun. It was also a complete mess. And that's just because, again, it was our first time like building something and me trying to navigate running a company, but it was also my first taste of being a producer because I knew what we wanted to create. So I had to think about timelines. I had to make sure people were delivering, getting these things together. But that's like what got me on like that entrepreneurial slash like, let me create my own studio. Then in parallel, you know, I had gotten a return offer to intern again at Microsoft. And that second time around when I came back, especially since I had already started building my studio, because of the power of networking and the power of community, there's this one organization at Microsoft called BAM. So that's Blacks at Microsoft. And that's where I met my mentor, Sarah Potter. And she was like, you know what? I know you're interested in games and inclusion. Have you heard of this team called Gaming for Everyone at Xbox? And I was like, no, like, tell me more, like all this stuff. And, you know, they weren't taking interns at the time, but fast forward, that actually ended up being my first like full-time career. And so I got a jump into being in the games industry from like a career standpoint outside of like entrepreneurial right out of college. And so from there, I was really able to like work in like the DEI space and understand how folks really build games where there's representation and we're thinking about accessibility, but also internally, how are you building organizations so you're recruiting diverse talent, but also maintaining that growth? But I also was missing the product. And so that's when I got my first like career gig as a producer, was when I got my role as a technical program manager at Minecraft. And so that was like around 2 years ago. And that's kind of like what my story was being a technical PM at Minecraft. And being a technical PM at Minecraft, it opened my eyes to all the things that happen behind the scenes. Like, you see this really dope game, but behind the scenes, you have your developers, you have your designers, but you also have all these folks that play these key roles to ensure what's coming out to you is at top quality. So game testers, I don't know how many people understand, like, you can get paid to play games, literally. And so I work closely with those game testers and really understand how they build out their test cases, working with our data scientists and looking at, okay, how do we ensure and measure what player behavior is going to look like before something comes out the door? Or how can we measure our past success so we can see how we can replicate or even go beyond that success moving forward? Really understanding like what our performance goals are, defining those, and also like how do you make sure you're communicating to your customer, but also communicating to your leadership at the same time. And so that was like kind of how I got myself into games. But I kind of dropped off my Youmatter studio story after this game studio and learning a lot. I was able to also get further into that intersection, because my junior year, after we kind of took a pause from games, as I'm growing in my career, I was able to take my first virtual reality class. And that was great, because that's when I was able to enable myself to be an award-winning filmmaker, because I created VR content that immersed people into our own shoes. The first film I created was talking about Sandra Bland and what she went through. And after doing that and meeting her mother, that's what inspired me to create our award-winning film, The Drive, that reenacts a police pullover from 3 different perspectives. And that was a great tool, especially in 2020, to really ignite and really have a solid base to have these conversations across communities. And so again, just continuing to grow my career in games while being able to create like content in films has been a dream. But yeah, that's my story.
I mean, I know you can't talk a lot about, what you're probably working on right this moment, but just kind of give us a little bit of hint of like the things that you're kind of, the ideas that are kind of working around you, and kind of what do you foresee sort of in the future as, this kind of gaming space is only gonna go, continue to go up, with the budgets and, graphically and just kind of all of these studios and just different things like that. So kind of what's like the next, I guess 5-10 years looking like for you and kind of into the future?
I definitely think that we're going to see more games that are heavy narrative, because the thing is, anyone should be able to play a game. And I think that we're seeing it more and more, that there's different games that are applying to more people, versus where I felt like we had more narrow segments. So I think you're going to see more diversity amongst different types of games, but also more leaning in onto like heavy narratives, incorporating music, and also ensuring that, again, games speak to stories and people that aren't typically represented. So I think like that's what we're going to see. For myself, in terms of game making, I just know that as a producer, especially as a games producer, I want to be known as that person that always worked on projects that was forefronting inclusion and really pushing the conversation forward. And I'm super excited that being at Decoy Games allows me to do that, because the game itself is going to be dope. Again, I can't talk about it too much, but just know like it falls within that realm. But also just the fact that I'm working at a company where the founders look like me, it's a very powerful feeling knowing that you're investing your talents in a trajectory that's going to really shift the economics. Because if we are such huge consumers of games, then we deserve and it is our right to have a seat at the table. And one way to do that is to support Black-owned game studios, because there's a ton out there. There's a lot of Black creators and Black developers. Like, we need to uplift our community in this industry. So that's what I see myself doing now, and also moving forward as like my primary focus in this industry is how can I invest in our community, uplift, but also be that example and show like, hey, you could be a game producer, you could work in games. Like, I didn't know my role existed until I was able to be in front of it and actually get the opportunity. And I want other people who look like me to know that, like, no, you can achieve that. So anything I can do to give back. And then outside of that, like, I just want to be that energy, like whether I'm a host, whether I'm creating content, whether you see me on screen, baby, like that's like what I see my future doing, whether I'm on stage hosting. I don't know, sky's the limit, but I'm super excited for this chapter because I feel like all the decisions and all the things I've learned in life have enabled me to do this. So
Just kind of plug yourself, flex a little bit, and it's your time to shine. Go ahead.
well, I know it's my time to shine, but I do want to say thank you so much for having me on this platform. You're 100% right about education, and that's why your platform is so important. So thank you for doing what you do. In terms of like where to find me, Instagram is a good way where you can just see all my latest. So Jewels of the Nile. Okay. So follow me on Instagram. Also, you can check out our studio website, youmatterstudios.com. And then also subscribe to me on YouTube at Jewel Ifeguni. So it's just my first and last name. And I have a Linktree, and it's just like my Linktree / like my first and last name. And that's where you'll see everything. Folks, I'm working on a personal website and stuff, so stay tuned. I may not be able to talk much about the game that Decoy Games is creating, but I will say you should definitely check out their first game, Swim Sanity. It's been big on multiple platforms, and that's actually how I first discovered the brothers. So definitely check that out. But also for me, I am launching a podcast soon. Name is pending, but we're gonna definitely be talking about journeys and growing into your best self and exposing y'all to a bunch of different careers and stuff. So I will just say, if you follow me on the platforms I mentioned earlier, you'll be sure to find out more about how to check me out there. So.